There are people who don't need to speak very much, yet the moment they sit down, the atmosphere around them quietly changes. Nothing feels tense. Nothing feels rushed. Everything seems to slow down, just enough for people to feel at ease. Taurus often carries that kind of presence. They don't try to impress anyone. They don't feel the need to prove who they are. And yet, over time, people naturally begin to listen to them, naturally begin to trust them. And then, quietly, a sense of respect takes shape without needing any explanation. You may have met a Taurus like this in your life. Or perhaps you carry that same energy yourself, without ever putting a name to it. Because the respect people feel for Taurus doesn't come from grand moments or dramatic gestures. It comes from small things he's done consistently, done honestly. And when we take the time to really observe that silence, to notice how Taurus remains steady while everything else keeps changing, we begin to understand something important. That some forms of strength don't need to be loud in order to be real. There is something people often only realize after they've lived through enough highs and lows in life. The loudest voice is not always the most trustworthy one. The most dazzling presence is not always the one that makes us feel safe. Sometimes, it's the quietest people who make us want to stay a little longer. Taurus often belongs to that kind of presence. They don't step into other people's lives in a rush. They don't push their way in. They don't overpower the room. They don't try to become the center of attention. But when they are there, you can feel something shift. It's as if the room begins to breathe more slowly, as if the shaking settles. Not because Taurus does anything remarkable, but because they carry a steadiness that's hard to put into words. You may have felt it before, sitting next to a Taurus, without needing to say much, and somehow feeling your chest soften. The worries don't disappear, but they lose their sharp edges. The unanswered questions don't go away, but they no longer cause panic. Taurus doesn't offer promises. They don't rush to give solutions. They simply stay. And somehow, that presence alone makes everything feel like it can wait a little longer. In a world that changes too quickly, where people are often pulled along by temporary emotions, Taurus seems to move at a different pace. Slower, more grounded. Not because they don't see the storms coming, but because they choose to remain steady instead of reacting to every wave. And that choice, repeated quietly over time, becomes the reason people respect them. Not loudly, not dramatically, but honestly. Taurus doesn't feel the need to prove that they are strong. They rarely talk about their endurance. But if you watch long enough, you'll notice something. They are still standing after things that caused others to walk away. They may be silent. They may take their time. But they don't leave easily. And within that silence, there is a rare kind of strength. The strength of someone who doesn't need to run from themselves. Respect for Taurus rarely appears all at once. It grows slowly, the way a tree grows. No one stands there every day watching it become taller. But one day, when shade is needed, people realize that tree has been there for a very long time. Taurus is much the same. They show up consistently. They remain steady. And when life becomes unstable, they are often the ones people turn to, sometimes without even knowing why. Perhaps what earns Taurus respect isn't that they are always right, but that they don't abandon themselves when things become difficult. They allow life to unfold at its own pace. They don't force themselves to become someone else just to meet outside expectations. And in doing so, they quietly teach a gentle lesson. That steadiness doesn't mean never falling. It means staying still long enough to regain balance. If you are a Taurus, you may have wondered why you aren't recognized right away, why your efforts are often taken for granted. But perhaps that quiet consistency is building something more lasting than you realize. Not for quick recognition, but for long-term trust. And in a world full of uncertainty, trust remains one of the rarest values we have. The steadiness of Taurus isn't loud, but it travels. It doesn't try to convince anyone, yet people find themselves leaning on it naturally. And maybe that's why, over time, Taurus is so often respected. Not because they try to be important, but because they stay. They stay with their values. They stay with what is real. And sometimes, that alone is a very powerful kind of strength. But if we stop there, we probably still haven't reached the full depth of Taurus. Because beneath the steadiness that others can see, there is another layer of strength. Quieter, less often named. Yet it is this strength that keeps Taurus standing year after year. Its inner determination. Taurus is not the kind of person who makes decisions impulsively. They take their time. They think things through. They weigh every angle. And sometimes, that slowness causes others to misunderstand them. To assume Taurus is hesitant. That they lack decisiveness. But the truth usually reveals itself later, after everything has settled. Once Taurus chooses a direction, they don't turn back easily because of a passing emotion or someone else's opinion. Not because they are stubborn, but because they've already walked through enough internal conversations before taking that first step forward. There is a kind of willpower that doesn't need loud words or forceful action. It's like an underground current, invisible, yet strong enough to keep the ground from collapsing. This is often how Tauruses will shows up. Quiet, deep, enduring. They don't need to win every argument. They don't feel the need to make everyone understand them. They only need to know that what they are doing aligns with their inner values. And that is enough. In moments when other people's emotions run high, Taurus is often the one who remains steady. Not because they don't feel pressure, but because they don't allow that pressure to pull them too far from their inner anchor. This determination isn't dramatic. It shows itself in simple ways. Taurus keeps doing what needs to be done. They keep moving forward, even when no one is watching, even when there is no praise waiting at the end. Over time, this creates a very particular kind of credibility. Not the kind that comes from status or authority, but the kind that grows out of consistency. People may not always agree with Taurus, but they tend to trust that Taurus won't change direction just because the wind shifts. And in a world where so much feels unstable, that consistency becomes a rare kind of refuge. Taurus rarely needs conflict to assert themselves. They don't try to defeat others to prove they are right. Their determination isn't about control. It's about staying still long enough for others to see the truth on their own. And when that happens, respect forms naturally, without arguments, without confrontation. Sometimes, Taurus may not even recognize this strength within themselves. They are simply living in a way that feels right to them. But year after year, through change and uncertainty, that quiet determination builds something solid. A foundation others can lean on. A foundation that doesn't collapse at the first sign of resistance. And in this very quiet way, it becomes one of the most enduring inner strengths that Taurus carries throughout an entire lifetime. And then, in a very natural way, that strength doesn't stay only inside Taurus. It begins to move outward, not loudly, not forcefully, but quietly, touching the people nearby. Some people walk into a room carrying tension with them. Others bring a sense of urgency, making the air feel heavier the moment they arrive. Taurus is different. Their presence doesn't always draw attention right away, but if you're sensitive enough to notice, the effect is very real. Around Taurus, many people find themselves breathing more slowly. The scattered thoughts don't disappear, but they stop rushing all at once. Everything feels more grounded, closer to the earth, as if someone has gently placed a steady hand on your shoulder and reminded you that things are still manageable. Taurus doesn't try to make people feel better. They don't offer loud encouragement or motivational words. What they bring is something much more ordinary and much more rare, a sense of stability. The feeling that you don't have to rush. You don't have to react right away. You don't have to be the best version of yourself in this exact moment. And that quiet permission to slow down often becomes an emotional anchor for others, especially during uncertain times. When everything around us is changing too fast, when news, pressure, and expectations keep pulling people out of balance, Taurus is often the one who manages to stay clear-headed. Not because they aren't affected, but because they hold on to what is concrete. Small routines. familiar values, things that have been tested by time. And in doing so, they quietly remind others that stability isn't a luxury. It's something that can be built one day at a time. Many people come to Taurus not necessarily for advice. Sometimes they just want to sit nearby, to share silence, to exist together in a moment that doesn't need explanation. Because the calm Taurus offers doesn't come from saying the right thing. It comes from not making others feel like they have to brace themselves. Around Taurus, people are allowed to be who they are, without fear of being judged. And in modern life, that kind of space is a very rare gift. That's why Taurus often becomes an emotional anchor without trying. Not because they were chosen, but because people feel safe around them. The stability Taurus brings doesn't solve every problem, but it creates enough quiet for problems to be seen more clearly. And sometimes, that alone is already something deeply valuable. From that sense of calm, something else slowly begins to form over time. Not rushed, not on display, but deep enough for others to eventually recognize. Trust. Not the kind of trust created in dramatic moments, but the kind that grows from very small things, done consistently, done honestly. Taurus rarely talks about what they plan to do in the future. They don't enjoy painting distant visions or making promises that sound impressive. Not because they lack dreams, but because they understand that words only matter when they are supported by action. For Taurus, speaking less isn't avoidance. It's a form of respect, for themselves and for others. At first, this can make Taurus seem reserved. Maybe even a little dull to some. They might not be the person who excites others from the very first meeting. But over time, when the big promises begin to fade, people start to notice something different about Taurus. They are still there, still doing the same things they've been doing all along, still showing up when needed, still keeping their word in the quietest way possible. Trust in Taurus doesn't come from a single heroic act. It's built day by day, through arriving on time, through finishing what they start, through following through on things that seem small, even when no one is watching. And it's that repetition, unpolished and unseen, that creates something solid beneath the surface. In a world where it's easier to promise than to follow through, the presence of Taurus stands apart. They don't need to say, "I'll be here," because they simply stay. They don't need to insist, "You can trust me," because over time, others come to see that Taurus doesn't disappear when things get difficult. Perhaps what earns Taurus respect isn't that they always do great things, but that they never dismiss the small ones. They understand that trust isn't built in shining moments, but in ordinary days lived with consistency. And once that trust takes root, it's very hard to replace. Because it isn't based on passing emotion, but on lived experience. For Taurus, keeping a promise isn't a burden. It's part of who they are. When they give their word, they try to see it through, not for praise, not for recognition, but because they don't want to disturb the balance they deeply value. And it's this way of living, slow yet steady, that makes Taurus the person others turn to when they need a real place to lean. Not loud, not showy, but solid enough to trust. And once trust has been placed, something else begins to take shape, quietly, in a way that feels very true to Taurus. Connection, not rushed, not careless, and not offered to everyone. Taurus isn't the type to open their heart right away. They observe, they listen. They need time to sense what, and who, truly aligns with the values they carry inside. Because of that, Taurus is sometimes misunderstood, seen as distant, hard to approach. But the truth is often much softer than that. Taurus is simply careful about what they allow to enter their life. Because once they don't choose halfway. Their loyalty doesn't come from a sudden surge of emotion, but from a deep inner agreement. They stay loyal to values that have been tested by time. Loyal to people who stayed, who walked with them through days that were not easy. And because that loyalty is built slowly, through real experience, it lasts. Taurus doesn't need big words to prove devotion. They show it through presence. By not leaving when things become inconvenient. By standing with what they believe is right, even when there is no obvious reward. That loyalty isn't loud, but it's unmistakable to those who are perceptive enough to see it. This may be what makes people value Taurus so deeply. When a Taurus stands beside you, you know it isn't temporary. You know they've considered it, thought it through, and chosen with lived experience, not just passing emotion. In a world where connection has become fragile, that kind of selective loyalty is something rare. Taurus also doesn't defend everything blindly just because they once cared. If something goes against their core values, they are capable of stepping back, slowly, without drama, without blame, but with clarity. And that shows something important. Their loyalty isn't self-sacrifice, it's self-respect. For Taurus, connection is a quiet commitment. It doesn't need to be repeated every day. It doesn't need constant proof. It exists in the way they stay, in the way they protect what they have chosen. And when someone realizes they are within that circle of loyalty, the feeling is often profound, because they understand this isn't something easily given, and it isn't something that can be replaced quickly. The loyalty of Taurus, then, is more than a trait. It's a gentle reminder that in life, some bonds don't need many words. They only need enough time and enough sincerity to be held, and then, as time moves forward long enough, life brings challenges that no one can truly avoid. They are not always loud, not always dramatic. Sometimes they arrive quietly. A loss, an unexpected change, a season where nothing seems to sit where it once did. And in moments like these, the way a person meets difficulty reveals more than words ever could. Taurus is not someone who reacts quickly to upheaval. They don't rush to escape. They don't immediately look for a way out. They also don't easily speak about what they are carrying inside. Instead, Taurus often steps back, becomes quieter, slows down. Not because they are weak, but because they are trying to keep the deepest part of themselves from breaking apart. There is a kind of endurance that cannot be seen with the naked eye. It doesn't show up in complaints. It doesn't appear through dramatic action. It lives in the act of continuing to exist, of remaining present. Even when everything around has changed, Taurus often carries this kind of endurance. They can hold more than others realize, and they do it without needing to be witnessed. After spending enough time moving through silence, Taurus begins to do something very characteristic. They rebuild, quietly, without announcements, one step at a time, sometimes very slowly. But each step is placed on firmer ground than before. Taurus does not try to force life back into its old shape at any cost. They accept that some things cannot return to what they once were. And from that acceptance, they begin to form a new shape for their life. This rebuilding is not a sudden transformation. It's more like restoring a home after a storm. First, clearing away the debris, then strengthening the foundation, only later tending to the smaller details. Each stage takes time, and Taurus is not afraid of that, because they understand that what is built in haste rarely lasts. From the outside, others may see Taurus as still quiet, still composed, much the same as before. But inside, many things have been rearranged. Many lessons have found their proper place. And this process is what makes Taurus stronger after each disruption. Not because they weren't hurt, but because they refuse to let the hurt define who they are. The respect people feel for Taurus is often born in moments like these. When others notice that Taurus is still standing, not more dazzling, but more solid, not more perfect, but more profound. And when it becomes clear that Taurus has rebuilt life from the foundation up, slowly, patiently, step by step, people begin to understand this is a kind of strength that cannot be easily learned. It is the strength of someone who does not give up, even without the need to win. The strength of someone who believes that after every collapse, a beginning is still possible, as long as patience remains, and respect for oneself is not lost. And from there, a very particular kind of influence begins to form around Taurus. Not the kind that demands attention right away, but the kind that slowly seeps in over time, like rain soaking into dry ground. Taurus rarely steps forward to lead with slogans or calls to action. They don't place themselves at the center asking others to follow. But by living honestly with their own values, Taurus quietly becomes a point of reference. People begin to observe them. At first, maybe just out of curiosity, then with more attention. And in very ordinary moments, someone realizes they've learned something from Taurus, even though no lesson was ever taught. The influence of Taurus doesn't come from persuasive words. It comes from how they respond to life. When things grow chaotic, Taurus doesn't panic. When everyone rushes to choose a direction, they keep their own rhythm. When values are treated like bargaining chips, they quietly stand with what they believe is right. And over time, those choices leave a mark. No one may say it out loud, but questions begin to surface. Why does this person earn respect without needing to be loud? Why do they not follow the crowd and still hold their place? And from those questions, something shifts. Slowly, naturally, no one is forced to change. No one is told what to do. But the steady presence of Taurus invites others to look back at themselves. This is not an influence that reveals itself quickly. It doesn't create explosions. It doesn't deliver instant excitement. But it stays. It follows people home. It returns in moments when difficult decisions must be made. And sometimes, without fully realizing why, people choose to act a little more like Taurus. Not because they want to imitate someone, but because they sense that this way of being brings balance. The influence of Taurus, then, is like a foundation layer. Not the most visible part of the picture. Not the element that dominates the frame. But without it, the image loses depth. And when people look back after a long stretch of time, they begin to see that these quiet influences helped shape how they think, how they choose, and how they stand within their own lives. This is the power of living true to one's values. No need to lead anyone, only the need to remain steady. And over time, that presence finds its own way to stay in the hearts of others. And when we look back at all of this, perhaps the most important thing Taurus carries is not a single trait, but the way they live with themselves through every season of life. No need to prove. No need to compare. No need to move faster than others just to feel worthy. Taurus offers a very quiet lesson. That strength doesn't always need grand gestures or powerful words. Sometimes, strength lives in staying calm when everything around feels unstable. In not losing yourself under the pressure to change too quickly. In trusting that simple values, if held long enough, will eventually find their place in this world. There may have been moments when Taurus wondered why their path seemed slower, why their effort wasn't always noticed right away. But perhaps that slower rhythm gave Taurus something invaluable: time. Time to build foundations that not everyone has. A foundation of honesty with oneself. A foundation of quiet consistency. A foundation of a life not easily pulled apart by outside turbulence. The lesson for Taurus is not to become someone else. It is to trust the way they have been living. To trust that persistence is not slowness, that patience is not weakness, and that staying loyal to core values, even when there is no applause, is a deeply courageous choice. When Taurus lives true to their calm, their sincerity, their steady nature, respect doesn't need to be chased. It appears naturally. Like the way people seek shelter when strong winds arrive. Not because the shelter is impressive, but because it stands firm. And perhaps the most beautiful thing about Taurus is this: while they quietly support themselves through every shift and disruption, they are also, in a very natural way, becoming a place of support for those around them. No promises, no declarations, simply by continuing to be who they are. Steady, patient, and strong enough for others to lean on when they need to.